Welcome to the Florida Trail Runners Project. Out in the woods, out in the swamps, down by the Willie Coochie. It started with a podcast, now it's a thing. The Florida Trail Runners, Florida Trail Runners.
All right, here we are with episode 132 of the Florida Trail Runners podcast. And on the chat, we've got Tyler Mastello in his Keys 100 mile. You know, this year he finished the Keys 100 with a time of 28:11:58, which is a huge improvement from his Tampa Bay 100 mile time of 34:39. And in the chat, you know, we talk about the Florida Keys, his prep, his training, firefighting, and how his Keys 100 went down. So hey, with that, let's just jump right into it.
Starting in the North, Tallahassee. Starting Central Florida, Tampa, Ocala, Orlando, Day City. Green Swamp, headed down south. Headed to the Keys, lake to ocean.
Hey!
Hey.
Congrats on the 100.
I appreciate you, bro. Thank you.
How are you feeling since the Keys 100 mile?
I mean, I'm feeling like I'm recovering pretty good. I definitely thought my feet were going to be way worse coming out of the race. I'll say that. This is like one of the hottest races I've done, and we started icing down like super early in the race, and I didn't think about where all the water was going to go from all that ice, and it went right to my feet. So it was nice and hot, no rain, no clouds, none of that, but my feet were just soaked all day. And I mean, I brought like 5 pairs of socks, and I went through them basically every 20-ish miles. I tried to keep one pair on for about 35 miles, but I mean, my feet were just wet. So when I got home and looked at, you know, the damage, there was a couple blisters on the pads of my feet, but other than that, wasn't too bad. And got on the treadmill yesterday and walked a little bit, and that kind of loosened up some of my leg muscles. And I got about a half an hour, 35 minutes in today, nice and easy, and feeling pretty good.
Nice. And I guess before we get too far, because I know some other races you've done, but I guess, you know, like, how'd you get into trail and ultra?
Well, I mean, like anything, it kind of starts with seeing something and going, I wonder if I can do that. And then that initially for me was just a trail race. And I come from the triathlon world. And I mean, I like triathlon. I did a lot of 70.3s. Unfortunately, they got super duper expensive. And so I started looking around, and I turned to the woods. I grew up in Massachusetts, and I spent a lot of time in the woods. So I kind of went back, and I then started looking around, and I found your races. And the first race that I did was the night race, the 30K. And I did it, and I was like, man, this is for me. The triathlon scene is it's fun, but it's definitely a little bit more stuck up and pretentious. The trail scene is just so chill. The vibes are so cool, so dope. The people are awesome. I mean, I did that one race and I was like, all right, well, this is what we're doing now.
I mean, even with that too, because you went Skunk Ape night run, and then you did Wild Boar night run. So you didn't even hit a day trail race until I think Croom Zoom.
No, yeah, I did the non-traditional entry into the kind of trail running world of doing night running. I mean, in the Marine Corps, we did a lot of, you know, night stuff, and it was kind of one of those things where I'd been out of that environment for a super long time. And as soon as I did the first one, I was like, oh man, I feel like a kid right now with my headlamp on, just running through the woods looking for little pink, you know, flags. And it was just such a cool vibe. It rained. I got wet. You know, I didn't know anything about trail running, so my feet were absolutely trashed, and it was only 19 miles. And I was like, man, that was something, dude. Let me see if I can figure this out and actually have fun with this and, you know, not suffer through it. And here we are.
Yeah, because I feel like that's an interesting thing where, you know, you've done a lot of the trail races, but you didn't hit the paved ultra until Pinellas Trail Challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of went ahead and signed up for the Tampa 100, and then after the fact was like, man, maybe I should try something on the road. And I signed up for Pinellas Trail Challenge, super awesome race. And I wore like Salomon S-Lab, like trail running shoes for it, which was a horrible move. But I found that out probably, you know, when I hit the halfway point, and I was like, what the hell did I do to my feet here? But it was definitely a learning experience, and it definitely taught me what not to do for Tampa coming up. So, I mean, I learned a lot that day through the Pinellas Trail Challenge, especially how hot it was going to be. Because, Tampa in November, you're thinking, oh, it's nice and chill. But I know Pinellas Trail Challenge is in August. It's super hot, but there was definitely some sections during Tampa that got blazing hot. And that day out there at Pinellas Trail Challenge definitely helped me for that.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people forget about, it's not really just the temperature outside, but you've also got the heat coming from the pavement below you.
I mean, that is 1,000% a factor. I definitely, during Keys, I mean, I did really well of like trying to, shade myself because I knew I didn't want to get absolutely fried because there was definitely a pretty good chance of being out for a decent amount of the time during the second day. And I knew if I got fried during the first day that it was going to really make that second day a lot more challenging than it was already. And I covered my arms with some arm sleeves. I wore, like a face mask, which kept everything good. I did not think about the back of my legs, and they got absolutely cooked the first day. And that second day when the sun came back out, it really wasn't even the sun from the above. It was the sun from the pavement that was just roasting my calves.
But I mean, I feel like those are the things that you learn when you start doing like a lot of the more road ultras with Pinellas Trail Challenge, Tampa Bay 100 mile. I mean, even coming into Tampa Bay, that's your first 100 miler that you went for.
So I actually did the Skunk Cape in Ocala, your 100 miler up there, and I ended up dropping down at 52 miles, at the halfway point. And honestly, doing that was something that I looked on for like the next 6 months until Tampa that I was like, damn, I can't believe I did that. Because I mean, I was in so much pain, but that's kind of what you're asking for when you sign up for one of these races, and that's definitely something that I learned after finishing my first one was, well, I mean, some people might be all right, but that's not going to be me. We're going to have to go through some pain to get these things done. And it was definitely, I mean, I moved to Tampa after the Marine Corps. I'd been here for about 10 years before that Tampa 100. So it was super special to finish my first 100 in the city that, is kind of my Florida home. It was an easy sign up for me because it's kind of a local race. I live in Brooksville, not too far away. And I mean, I'm a pretty big fan of the point-to-point stuff, I've found out too.
That's what's nice about it. With point to point, I mean, low key, it's kind of a flex that like you ran from here to here.
Yeah, especially because, I work around here. So everybody that I work with drives around all these roads all over the time. So it's like you show them the map and they're like, oh my God. And then they kind of look at you like you're a little crazy, but it's fair.
Well, that's why I feel like there's a few big flex races of Florida, like Tampa Bay. You got the whole Tampa Bay. Miami 100, you have all of Miami. Lake Okeechobee, the Lost 118, all the way around Lake Okeechobee, and obviously the Keys 100. You did the whole Keys.
Yeah, I mean the Keys race is super awesome. I mean, me and my wife go down there a couple times a year, and being able to run the whole length of the Keys, I mean, it was super awesome. It was very, very hot during the day. There's definitely a couple sections of the race where you're like, man, I signed up for this, And I want to say like Hell's Tunnel or something like that, I think it's called. There's a section that's like 5 miles just along the salt marsh, and it is just roasting. And there was a bunch of poles that were, maybe about a quarter of a mile, eighth of a mile apart. And I just started doing like a run walk method just to get through this section. And it popped into my head as like a little game. I'd be like, oh, I hit a pole, and I'd be like, all right, time to run a pole. And then I'd run that section, and then I'd do the next one, and I'd be like, all right, I can walk this pole. And that was all good. And then like 55 poles later, I'm like, all right, let's run a pole. Let's walk a pole, But you got to do something to keep yourself a little entertained. But I mean, the sections of Big Pine at night, just incredible, dude. I mean, the amount of stars that you can see. And I hit the 7 Mile bridge like right at sunset. So I got to hit the crest of the bridge like as the sun was going down. I mean, just things that, you know what I mean? When you do it, you're like, holy shit, dude, I can't believe I'm actually doing this right now. And then when you finish, it's definitely, I mean, I finished at like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. So it was super hot on Higgs Beach. So was very thankful for the medical staff there. They had some tents, set up with some benches laid out, and I took full advantage of those benches.
Well, that's kind of the interesting thing too, because for some of the races, it's kind of hard to train for those like very specific like environments that you're going through.
That was kind of one thing. After the Skunk Ape 100 turned 50, I was in a weird headspace for a little while after that race. And because it was the first thing that I had signed up for in a super duper long time that absolutely put me on my ass and that I didn't finish. So it put me into like a real weird headspace for a little bit. And I was like, all right, well, my legs were fried, so let me do soft surface running. So I did like 90% of my training for Tampa on the treadmill, which boring. But so after Tampa, I was like, okay, I mean, I survived this thing, but I was not prepared. Because, I mean, the treadmill's awesome. You get the miles in, but you don't get any wind. There's no sun. There's no, changes in even just the sidewalk or anything like that. So after Tampa, I decided, okay, for Keys, I'm just going to do all of my running outside. And then after the winter, I was like, well, it's going to be super hot for this race. So let me do all of my running at like noon to like 2 p.m. And that's when I would go, on my runs. And with my schedule at work, I'm pretty lucky to have a couple days off after each day. So it really opens it up to be able to run at like noon or 1, 2 o'clock, the hottest part of the day.
Which is a blessing for you and a curse for many.
It is. I will say running outside though for the 6 months leading up to Keys and running in the heat for the last like 3-4 months leading up was huge. If I'd have been on the treadmill, I can tell you right now confidently, I don't think I would have finished that race because it was hot. It wasn't even necessarily that humid. It was just unrelenting sun for like 13 straight hours.
Well, I mean, even with work, you're on your feet a lot too, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah. I mean, we definitely. So the deal is, though, we just got a new schedule earlier this year in the middle of January to where we used to work 24 hours on, 48 hours off. Now we work 24 hours on and have 72 hours off after each shift. So, I mean, for training for, ultras and stuff like that, it really opens up the training schedule and it allows a lot of time for rest and recovery. And we don't have any kids or anything like that. So definitely opens it up for, hanging out with the wife. And if we want to go do something, we can go do it. She's been super crucial to helping me out with these races. She pretty much solo crews like all these races. And I mean, definitely helps me get to the finish line on any of these because we were looking at some of these crews in the Keys and they're like 5-6 people deep and they have doctors and massage therapists on the team and my wife's like, hey, here's a McDouble, keep going.
You don't need all of that nonsense. It's the simplicity of it.
I agree. I was thinking, I was like, man, I should have hired that film crew, but
I don't think I would ever hire a film crew to watch me because what are they going to see? Me sit down on the chair, and go, oh, screw this,
dude. You're gonna see 1 hour of me being like, oh yeah, hell yeah, this is what I signed up for, and then the next like 26-7 hours is just gonna be me going, oh.
Complain and complain and complain. Nah, that's a terrible video.
Like I super respect the people that are very positive runners. I am trying to learn to become one of them. I'm like a very negative runner. I'm like, you little bitch, keep going, and then I end up throwing up and then putting a Zyn in and then drinking some caffeine and then we keep moving and that's how life goes sometimes,
Well, that sometimes that's the military mindset there.
It is. You got to puke and rally, you know?
But I guess even with that, because you mentioned like your hours for work, because I think you're a firefighter, right?
Yeah, I'm a fire medic with one of the local fire departments around here.
Yeah, and kind of what made you go that route?
I mean, so when I got out of the Marine Corps, I did 4 years in the Marine Corps. Nothing super crazy. I'm not a very heroic or, I don't have one of those crazy stories or anything like that. But, I did 4 years in the Marine Corps and it gave me my GI Bill. When I first got out, I had absolutely no intention of using it. And then I worked like 2 or 3 dead end jobs and I was like, you know what? I'm at like a crossroad right here and I could go continue down the partying route and, watch my life kind of just go down the drain, or I can use this crazy benefit that the military gave me to, go to school and actually make a little bit out of the dash. And that's kind of when I was like, all right, what can I do? So I come from, not one of these families where I'm like, oh, my dad was a firefighter, my grandpa was a firefighter, his dad was a firefighter. I just kind of looked at it and was like, man, that seems like a fun job. How do I do that? And in reality, I wanted to be a paramedic. So I went to EMT school. And when I got done with that, everybody was like, hey, when are you going to fire academy? And I was like, I'm not going to fire academy. I kind of want to go to paramedic school. They said, well, if you want to work in Florida and make money, you kind of need to work for a fire department. So I'm pretty good at picking up on clues. So I signed up for fire academy. And it was like one of those random things that I signed up for. And I absolutely ended up loving it. And it's one of those jobs that you never know what's coming that day. And that's kind of the fun aspect of it to me. I was never, I was born to be an outside friend, as some would say.
Especially with that career path. I mean, I think there's just a lot of things that a lot of people just don't understand, like what the day to day is.
I mean, there's definitely, so my first 4 or 5, so I got 7 years on with the department now. And the first 4 years, 5 years, I was at super high volume, very busy stations. And I mean, in a 24-hour period, sometimes we were running 22, 23 calls a shift. So, I mean, that means you're getting maybe 40 minutes of sleep. Like I used to wear a Whoop band, and after every shift, Whoop would be like, oh, you have 1%. Don't do anything. And that's when it became very counterproductive for me because I was like, oh, Whoop doesn't think I can do anything? All right, let me go on a 70-mile bike ride or, whatever. So it became like a little challenge. And about 2 years ago, I moved over to a slower station, and it definitely helped out with being able to sleep at work. I mean, we run probably 5 or 6, maybe 7 calls on a busy day now. So with that, maybe 1 call after midnight. Most of the time we're sleeping all night. So that definitely helps. And it's one of those things that I never really thought about sleep a whole lot as I was younger because I feel like you can compensate a lot. But being 33 now, it's definitely one of those things where I'm like, okay, I definitely need a little bit more sleep and, to recover a little bit more.
And that's what I think is interesting where, I mean, you probably see it now with all the how it's so dry out. There's so many calls for all these little brush fires.
And that is the deal. I mean, especially, I know we've gotten a little bit of rain here, but the last 6 months has been a lot of brush fires. And I mean, a lot of it's, I'm no fire investigator or anything, but a lot of it's, people flicking cigarettes out of the window or a lot of things that people don't even think that would ever start something that big, but everything is just so dry. And I mean, if there's any wind, which there usually is around here, I mean, as soon as that thing starts, starts spreading pretty quick. And we have a lot of, undeveloped areas around here that are super overgrown. So it can go from nothing to something pretty fast.
Yeah, because I mean, it's just about the 3 elements of the fire triangle.
Absolutely. Oxygen, fire, and an ignition source. When things are super dry, anything can reach essentially what's called like a flash point, and everything has its own flash point. And a lot of times, I mean, aside from a cigarette or something like that being thrown out, that's pretty easy to be like, well, the cigarette was on fire. It caught, the grass on fire. But sometimes it could be a reflection off of a building or something like that. I mean, think of the, magnifying glass on the anthill type thing. If you're, reflecting something off that's holding a lot of heat, and it hits something that's super dry and it sits in that same position and it heats it up long enough, it is essentially going to catch itself on fire. And that's how a lot of these bigger fires start. A lot of these fires out west, you'll end up hearing about. A lot of that's, people working on the power lines, or, there's a lot of arson too. That's kind of the other thing. People are out there setting stuff on fire for whatever reason.
Well, I guess that kind of makes sense. Like there's been 2 fires in the Ocala National Forest recently from vehicles.
So a lot of that comes from, you can look them up on YouTube, like cops, when they get after like a high-speed chase or whatever, they pull off into the grass and the grass is a little too hot. The engine underneath, that can catch the grass on fire, and then all of a sudden, or, if you've ever stood next to the exhaust, some of these exhausts throw out some heat, and given enough opportunity, the fire can start, and that's definitely if it's somewhere close to the station, you can make a pretty quick attack on it, get it down. It's not too bad. Then you got to watch it, make sure nothing else catches on fire. But like in the Ocala National Forest, some of that is super duper out there. And it's going to take a second to get a lot of water on it. So if they're not, doing controlled burns or anything like that, which the controlled burns are good, but you can't control burn everything, unfortunately.
I thought that's why they call it now. They use the word prescribed burn.
So it definitely, it helps. Like they do it in like Starkey all the time. And so what they'll do is essentially, when the fire risk is super high, they go out and start their own fire that they can essentially coordinate. And a lot of that is Department of Forestry. But they'll go out there, start a fire, watch it as it's burning. And then once something's already burnt, they call that like the black area. Once it's already burnt, then the fire risk is gone. If something's already burnt, it can't catch back on fire. And in Florida's ecosystem, the fires are kind of like a natural occurring thing as well. If you look in like the Everglades and stuff, areas like that, that fire burns the overgrowth down, and then everything during the first rainstorm after that, you see it starts growing back nice and green. A lot of the trails that you run on, like up in citrus forest and like areas like that, even out in the green swamp, they do the controlled burns out there. And, it's miraculous to see the nature take itself back, but that's kind of what it's been doing for millions of years,
Well, that's what I think is interesting, because like they'll be out there and they'll do it and they'll hit some spots with water, but it's interesting how water actually puts out the fire.
Yeah, especially, a house versus forest is 2 different things too, because then, in like a house, you have combustible components like, couches and, different building materials. The wood, a lot of times you're good as if it's, low-lying grass, you can make a pretty good hit on that with just a little bit of water and you'll be able to put the fire out pretty quick. It's when you get into some of these trees, like a lot of these trees start burning and you'll put the fire out, but it's actually burning on the inside of the tree. Or a lot of times it'll burn down the root system, so it'll actually be burning like under the leaves. So it's just, one of those things where you'll think you put that tree out, and then all of a sudden you look back and, okay, it sparked back up, and you hit it with water again, and then it sparks back up, and then you're like, all right, come on. But it's just holding so much heat internally that it just keeps putting itself back on fire, essentially, which is why a lot of times the main bulk of the fire is put out decently quick. And then a lot of it is, with like mop-up operations where you're just hitting little hot spots. And if Department of Forestry comes out and works with us, a lot of times they'll cut fire lines. So they'll, take these big old bulldozers and just cut these huge holes in the ground all the way around the fire. And in theory, that's going to keep the fire contained into the ring as long as they can get around the whole thing. Then it'll essentially burn itself out because it'll run out of stuff to burn eventually.
I guess that's the difference between when they have to use foam on a fire versus water.
So the foam definitely helps because it's got saponification in it. So like it basically is breaking down on a chemical level the fire as opposed to just putting water on it, which is just essentially putting the water out through a cooling effect. If you have foam, a lot of times it's mixed with water. So then you get the cooling effect and you get the actual like chain breaking effect of the soap. So it foams over a little bit, makes a little bit of a protective barrier, and it kind of prevents it from getting more oxygen so it can just keep feeding itself. And I mean, a lot of times I don't know too much about the fire retardant that the helicopters and the planes drop, but we don't use a lot of that around here. If we have forest fires, a lot of times what they'll end up doing is they'll end up dropping water from the plane, or the helicopter will start flying around and picking water up and dropping it out of the Bambi bucket, which was pretty cool to see too.
I saw that the other day. Well, not the other day. It was probably a couple weeks ago. We were driving, and then we saw the helicopter moving around.
Yeah, and that's actually the sheriff's office helicopter. So shout out to the sheriff's office helicopter. I mean, that whole crew, they do so much more than just flying around and doing police stuff. I mean, those guys are incredible.
And that's why I think it's interesting when you have like offensive fire versus a defensive fire.
Yeah, when it's offensive, I mean, you're getting it. That's because you're trying to prevent somebody's house from burning down. And it can change in the middle of it, because you can have a fast moving fire that's moving towards somebody's house, and then you go ahead and make a fast attack on that and take care of that fire, saving that person's house. And then it kind of changes to a more defensive strategy to like, okay, everything that burned towards that house is now burnt. Let's go ahead and take our time, manage our resources. Because unfortunately, if you're out in the woods like that, most of the time there's not hydrants. So you're relying upon tankers, which are big 3,000, 3,500 gallon water trucks, basically, to come fill up the engines, and then sometimes filling up your brush truck off the engine or off the tanker as well. Most of the brush trucks only hold about 500 gallons of water. So you can go through that pretty quick if you're, full blast in it.
You said brush truck. It reminded me when I was in the Army, my commander had this souped up Polaris Ranger, and it would backfire and everything. We were downrange, and I'm in the Humvee, like in the Humvee uprange. And all of a sudden, I get a phone call from my commander. I'm like, that's kind of weird. I don't know why he's not talking to me on the radio. Well, his Polaris Ranger caught fire, and now the grass is on fire. And because I'm his little LT, so I had to call the fire department to report the fire on the range.
Yeah.
And I just remember when they came out there, all of a sudden they're requesting a brush truck.
I mean, so the cool thing about those is, everybody's seen like your typical fire engine and your ambulance, but the brush trucks come in so many different configurations. But the county just bought, a whole new fleet of brush trucks, and they are just absolutely massive, and they are so fun to drive out there. And I mean, we first got them, we got to use them. I was like, oh man, these are super fun to drive. They got the nozzles mounted into the front of them like most brush trucks, but they have a joystick in there that, you can fight fire from the inside of the cab while you're driving. And it's very, makes me feel like I'm a kid sometimes. And I'm like, oh man, I got this joystick right here and I can shoot some water out of the front of my truck. Is this even a real job?
The brush truck just has water, right?
It's got water. It does have foam capabilities. It's got, a chainsaw on there, some tools. Because sometimes, you got to get into some of the more thick stuff. If you got a pile, a lot of times we run on people that are illegally burning, and they're just burning a big old pile of trash or whatever. So we have rakes and, specialized equipment in there to kind of break some of that stuff up. Because, I mean, if you have a big bonfire that's burning, the heat has already traveled so deep into the center of that the water is not able to penetrate it. So in order to get down to the actual, seat of the fire, like where the actual root of the fire is, you got to do some man work, and you got to go ahead and start breaking up some of that pile. So we got rakes and stuff in there to do that. And, that gets a little spicy, but, helps develop a good tan.
Well, I guess that makes sense earlier when you're talking about like with the fires. I mean, that's why, I know on the Skunk Ape course, you do have the berm, which is, I guess, the nemesis of the course for a lot of these. I mean, the 50 mile, 100 mile has it.
Yeah.
The Night Run Revenge course has it. I mean, I guess that's the point of it too. It is a fire break.
That is 100% what that, with the berm is. That is what it is. It's a fire break. So, the next time you're out there, show a little bit of appreciation for the berm, because that's preventing everything from burning down, okay? Put some respect on the berm.
Which is wild on your side, because I think this year you did the ruck with one of your guys.
I did, yeah. I got a buddy, Jared, who every once in a while, kick him in the ass and be like, "Hey, buddy, let's go do some hard shit." And so this year I had him sign up for the ruck with me, the 30K, and I didn't really tell him a whole lot about it. I figured it would be best if he just learned along the way, and a lot of learning occurred, and we got it done. And I'm super proud of him because he had no idea what to expect, and I know it was way more than he was initially probably expecting, but he gritted it out and he got it done. And that same day too, my buddy Jack did his first 60K, and that's who I ended up doing my first triathlon with. And I ended up going off and doing a bunch of racing, and he ended up going off and starting a family and raising some kids and everything. And we finally got him back out on the course, and we got him to do Cruise Zoom earlier this year, and he enjoyed that so much that he decided he was going to sign up for the 60K. So he ended up going out and doing his, PR distance forever. So super proud of him for that too.
Yeah, hey, we might see this in the field, but now we get to run through it.
Exactly.
I mean, because I know that's your last race that you had was Skunk Ape's Revenge before the Keys. I mean, what kind of training did you do leading up to the Keys 100?
So after the ruck, I actually had a little bit of like a weird injury, and I didn't go to the doctor or anything because that's not really my style, and I decided I was just going to run through it. And thank God it worked out, because about maybe 5 weeks I felt a little down and I was a little off, and then after that like 5 week mark, it completely turned around and I started feeling like I was in really good shape and no more pain. And I was able to just kind of go out, and no heroic miles or anything like that. That's not really my style. I'm just kind of trying to hit, 50 to like 60 miles a week. But that was more than I had done for any of the races leading up to that. So I feel like kind of sticking to that plan worked out really well, because I didn't like super overcook myself.
And then with the Keys course, I mean, they cross a lot of these bridges. I mean, did you work on crossing bridges or anything like that?
So on my normal run course, I usually run on, there's a big old loop that I run that includes the Sun Coast, and there's a couple of, being up here in Brooksville, we're blessed with a little bit of elevation. So definitely hitting some, up and downs on those, but not really anything overly specific. I mean, if I go in a 10-mile run, if I walk outside of my house and go on a 10-mile run from here, I can get probably about 900 or 1,000 feet of elevation gain without really trying to go out of my way. So that's kind of a nice part about living up here. It kind of, especially for the Keys, because the only elevation is the bridges. And, my initial goal was to go in and just kind of hold, a decent, for me, pace, which was going to be like a 10:30 to an 11-minute pace for as long as I could until it got super hot. And then I was going to, switch it up and try to slow down a little bit, because I figured once the sun came out, it was gonna be on. And I was able to hold it pretty good together for about the first 75, 76 miles. And I bought a new watch for this race because I wanted my battery to last the whole entire time. What I didn't think about was, if you use the flashlight on the Enduro 3 as your headlamp, it will absolutely fry the battery on the Enduro. So to my surprise, I hit 85 miles and I looked down and my watch was dead. So I was like, oh, wasn't expecting this. So when I got to the next stop, I charged it for about 5 minutes, and, I got 9%, and it was able to hold the 9% the rest of the way. But it was one of those things where it broke up the segments. So for the first like 85 miles, I think my average pace was like 15:40 or something like that. So that was totally good. But that was about where the wheels fell off. And there was a lot of, motivational power walking after that. But it was definitely one of those things where as soon as the sun started coming up, I was like, I need to get this done, because I do not want to be out here in the sun for an extended period of time today.
It's funny because I saw on Strava, I'm like, oh, damn, he didn't make it. But I never looked until I saw later on Instagram. I'm like, oh shit, he finished.
Yeah. 2 segments, baby. 2 segments.
And I mean, even coming into the Keys, when did you decide that, like, hey, I'm going to go for the Keys 100?
I'd started looking around at some of the other races, and obviously you got the races out west and some of the bigger ones in Colorado and stuff like that. But I think it's so awesome just how massive the ultra community is here in Florida that you really don't have to go that far to hit up like 50 different races of all different distances. And then, so I started looking into some of the other hundreds around the state, and I saw the Keys. I had a couple friends that ran it last year, and you probably know sometimes when you see things, you get FOMO and you're like, oh, that looks terrible. How do I sign up? And so that was kind of my mentality for that. So I wanted to make sure I survived Tampa 100 first, make sure I didn't have any retirement moments or anything like that. And so pretty much the week after Tampa 100, I signed up for Keys. And I mean, I took about a week off, and then for Thanksgiving, I worked a 48 at the station, and I did the 4x4x48 challenge on the treadmill at work. And I mean, doing that maybe like 2 or 3 weeks after Tampa 100, I was like, okay, my legs don't feel as bad as I was expecting. So it gave me a lot of motivation going into, after signing up for Keys and getting it done. And then basically my only goal was to show up and finish this race. The Tampa race, I finished in like 32 hours and 45 minutes. The cutoff for this race was 32 hours. So I knew I was going to have to go faster than I did last time. And I mean, it was super nice to come in just a little bit over 28 hours and not have to be out there in that sun for too long the second day.
Well, that's why I think it's interesting too, because obviously with the Tampa Bay 100, yeah, you did 32 hours and probably like 45 minutes, something like that. I think that's what it says on Ultra Sign Up or whatever we came up with. But I mean, for that much pavement for that many hours, I feel like there's so many things that you could learn from Tampa to have a successful Keys 100.
No, 100%. I mean, when I was doing a little bit of research and watching some of the videos, there's some pretty good videos on YouTube about the Keys 100 race. I think his name's Brady Shiverwood. Shout out to him because he's got like an hour-long video of his race on there. And it's a pretty good recap, and, check it out. If it's something that you're into, go ahead and sign up next year. But I don't know, it's definitely one of those things where the Keys was playing such a big role in our lives that I was like, oh man, it'd be really cool to do this 100, finish this. And then now that I'm kind of into that 100-miler shape, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, man, like can't really waste being in this shape. So it's kind of like, let me just keep rolling with this. And I actually have, really enjoyed these races. They're long, they're brutal, but it's one of those things where you get so much time to just think about things. Nothing really matters other than taking the next step. They're hard. They suck. You want to quit. You can do it at literally any time and nobody cares. There's nobody, there's not massive crowds there watching you or anything like that. But it's like being able to make the commitment to yourself and then seeing it through, I think is huge for, human growth in general. Doing hard things is the basis of growth. So
yeah, exactly. And I think, if you're able to finish a Tampa Bay 100, which I think Keys 100 is harder because of the heat. Tampa Bay is hard because of the logistics aspect for the runner. I mean, coming into race day for Keys 100, I mean, you kind of already touched on it a little bit, but like, what was that strategy?
So the main strategy was not to blow up because I have a huge tendency of going out way too fast, and, that comes back to really bite you in the ass in a lot of these longer races. Like during a triathlon, you can kind of recover from that a little bit and you can, eat a gel or whatever. It's going to be over here shortly. Well, in 100, as you know, I mean, mistakes that you make in the first 5 to 10 miles are going to super bite you in the ass about 60, 70 miles. And it was one of those things that I wanted to enjoy this race and not absolutely suffer through the whole thing. So that's why I was just kind of like, all right, let me go ahead and try to make it as far as I can before the sun comes up. And then I was still feeling really good when the sun came up. So I was just like, well, let me go ahead and rock with this. And I'm not even going to say that if I had slowed down a little bit more, that it would have made that much of a difference, because 85 miles is 85 miles sometimes, you know what I mean?
Well, I think a big part of that too can be like the fueling strategy too.
Yeah, I mean, if you're feeling good, you kind of got to lock into that. I mean, there was during the Skunk Ape 60K, Skunk Ape's Revenge last year, I on the way there decided to do something completely new, and I drank one of those like Starbucks triple espresso, like, you know, super full of bullshit drinks. And oh man, that was a poor choice. That made that whole entire race bad. Talk about GI issues.
Yeah, with Keys 100, I mean, what'd you go with for your fueling hydration?
So that's like one of, I would say, the other than the heat, the next most challenging thing is it's 100 miles and there's no aid stations at all. So it's one of those things where I was like, man, what do I like to eat during these races? Like when I pull into some of these aid stations, like what's something that I'm like, oh, I really like to see that. And we went with chips, some nerds, clusters, some of those Idaho, like, you know, mashed potato, like pre-mixed things. And I had a bunch of goo gels and a bunch of Cliff Blocks. That was like the main component of what I was going with. And then I didn't want to carry a pack because I figured if we were going to be stopping in like every 5 miles, I didn't want the extra weight on my bag for the whole race. So I just carried like one of those Solomon soft flask with me with just water in it, and then 2 or 3 gels in my pocket. And then I would alternate every 5 miles. Like I had a bag of beef jerky and a bag of the Nerds clusters. So it was kind of like savory, a little bit of sweet, just to not get all like sweeted out too early. And then I had a couple of those Honey Stinger like caffeine gels, and those were pretty nice. They were like some mocha espresso, like, you know, super Italian high end fancy things. And I had a couple of those, and then my wife hooked it up and got me McDonald's right before the 7 Mile Bridge. And I had a McDouble and a large French fry that I dropped on the ground and did not care. I ate the French fries off the ground and drank a big old smoothie and picked it up and, you know, headed for the bridge. But other than that, it was mainly, you know, that I had like maybe 2 or 3 energy drinks throughout the day. And that was pretty much about it.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of piggybacking off of that too, because a lot of people talk about how hot it is. I mean, ice. I mean, you did mention that earlier with your feet. I mean, how important was the ice?
So that's the deal. It's one of those things where I was like, man, my feet got super wet, and that was, you know, slightly annoying for the whole race, but it didn't even matter. The ice was so crucial that in the ice bandana and putting some in my hat, and I would take the arm sleeves off and my hat off every once in a while and put them in the cooler with because we had just a separate cooler with just ice in it. And at one point the ice started melting, so it was like an ice water. So I was just dumping my hat and the arm sleeves in the water and then, you know, just putting it back on, getting my feet more wet in the process, but it honestly didn't matter. They were going to be wet one way or the other from sweat but just keeping cool. And then I had like 2 or 3 Element bottles that my wife had on standby in the cooler at all times too. So when I would come in at each stop, I would smash one of those. And then as the race kind of went on, we started making some creatine bottles, and I would hit one of those every once in a while too.
Heck yeah, with the sups.
Oh yeah. Sign me up for go one more, dude.
Which I think it's important too with what you said even earlier. The point of the aid stations, right? I mean, it's your crew. Like that's where you're going to get all of your aid is from your crew. I mean, the crew is obviously required for the Keys 100. I mean, how did you go about? I think you said it was it just your wife as your crew?
Oh yeah. Yeah, just my wife. She got her first run through during the Ocala race, but I mean, that race is a little bit more, picky and choosy where you meet up with your crew and everything. And then during Tampa 100, she solo crewed that race. And that was her first like full blown experience actually like crewing like that. And I mean, for having no experience with it, she absolutely crushed it. She's in medical as well. So she takes care of blisters. She makes food. She tells me to keep moving, which is awesome. That's exactly what I need to hear. So when we went into this race, she was definitely way more prepped for it. But if you look at the race guide for this race, I mean, there's like 4 pages of just like crew stops, and there's a bunch of rules to where, you can stop here, but if you stop here, you can potentially get assessed a penalty. And I understand all of the rules. I mean, the Keys is a super kind of tight knit community as it is, and it's a super tight area. I mean, most of the road or the race is on the shoulder of the road. So it's definitely one of those things where I get why there's a lot of rules, but I mean, I've never seen so many specific rules for a race. And to hand that over to my wife and be like, all right, cool, I'm just going to run. Hopefully you can figure all this out. And I mean, she nailed it. There was the time where I pulled it. I didn't even say anything, but I definitely know that she probably sensed that I was like getting a little grumpy and needed some food. And I pulled up and she had mashed potatoes just ready to go and a Coke. And oh my God, that's why I married this woman.
That is a big thing with the Keys 100 is when you look at like the course details and meetup page, there's so many things. I mean, the Seabird Marina, stay clear. Do not enter this property for any reason. Clearly, somebody
straight to jail.
Somebody messed that up for everybody.
And I mean, that is the only thing I could think of when I was reading all these rules, is because I think this was the 18th year of the race. And, for them to have all those specific rules, like you just said, somebody had to mess this up for everybody at one point.
But I guess it makes sense, though. But I guess it also allows you to know, like, okay, here, this is exactly where it's going to be. This is where exactly it's going to be.
Yeah, and I mean, they had a bunch of race marshals out there throughout the whole course, and I mean, shout out to all of them because they were super cool as well. And none of them were being crazy or anything like that. They were just there helping the flow of the race and doing race marshal stuff. So shout out to them for being out there.
I mean, because if people went willy nilly everywhere, that's what gets a race canceled. And so I think Ragnar had a Keys race, and I think the county did not appreciate how those people acted.
Yeah, the keyword there is had a race, but I mean, I think a little bit of it might be attributed to, like, this is I feel like a big name race to where it's got a lot of name recognition and, it's got the challenge factor to it. So as opposed to a lot of, I don't know, the skunk ape races and things like that, to where you show up and it's a lot of like the same people that you see during every race. And, there's always some new faces and everybody has a really good time. I feel like some of these people that show up for some of these bigger named races are there for, let me get my clicks and let me get my video or whatever. And I mean, it's very interesting because I don't see that very often, especially, I haven't seen that really since the triathlon side of it. But like I said, I mean, you got some of these guys that have like full film crews and everything, and I'm just like, oh man, like, what am I doing?
I mean, even with the crew, I guess there's always things that can go wrong, that a lot of people just don't realize.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially because, like, with all of those rules in there, I mean, the first time that you break one of those rules or whatever, it's a warning. The second time you break a rule, it's a 1-hour time penalty. And for somebody like me that, was potentially pushing that limit already, definitely don't need to be getting a 1-hour time penalty. But, that's one of the things that I think is cool about these organized races is they do have the rules for a reason, but, they're there just to keep you safe. And like I said, a lot of this race was on the shoulder of the road. So, I mean, when you're 85 miles in and it's 3:00 in the morning and you're in the middle of Big Pine and it's completely dark and you see the car coming around the corner for the first time in like 30 minutes, you're like, oh shit. Yeah. No, I am on like a fully open road. So it's definitely, nice to have the rules and have all the cones up, and they did a good job of marking everything, and I had a lot of fun at the race.
Yeah, and I guess coming into the race, I mean, race morning, you're about to start. What's the start of the Keys 100 like?
So, I mean, it was super cool vibes. Unfortunately, like by the time I went to go sign up, most of the early time slots had already been taken. So I started at 7 a.m. Not ideal, but it's a start time. And so I honestly, I showed up in like true me fashion. Like I showed up, I mean, I was in the parking lot, 15 minutes before like 6:45 in the morning, but I walked up and it was like 7 a.m. 15. You know what I mean? And I was like, oh shit, like they already took off. And I was like, hey, I'm 7 a.m. I'm good to go. And they're like, yep, you're good to go. So yeah, I started 15 seconds late, but it was nice. I didn't have any jitters, no hype waiting around for the start. Just kind of walked up and started running. Not exactly my plan, but that's what happened.
You know what? Sometimes it I feel like that could just block out the nerves though, because now it's just like, oh shit, all right, let's go.
Yeah. I mean, I initially started listening to music, so I kind of just got into a little bit of a zone right off the way. And then, like, for most of the nighttime, I cut the music out and just kind of took in the vibes of like, I don't know, it's one of those things where when you're in a place that's usually so busy and so bustling, and all of a sudden it's completely dead and completely quiet, and there's key deer running towards you, it's one of those things where it's like, man, let me just take all this in, because like not everybody's going to ever have the opportunity to do this. Everybody has the chance to sign up for the race, but I don't know that everybody will end up doing it. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things where it's like, man, I feel super blessed to just be able to be out here and do this.
Yeah. And before we talk about how the miles went down, but I have to sidebar onto the key deer. These deer are ridiculous. And it's so interesting because for me, my only experience with the Keys back in high school, I went to the Florida Sea Base for Boy Scouts that
Okay.
in the Keys. I never realized how bold these deers are and how they've adapted to salt water. So they're like these skinny little deer, and then they just go wherever they want.
Yeah, they're like, they kind of look like a golden retriever without the fur. But they, when we pulled into one of the crew stops, my wife was like, hey, there's like a bunch of key deer just like hanging out here. And I started looking around, and there was probably about 4 or 5 of them, and they did not care that there was, 70 people in this parking lot right now. And then I took off and started running, and I was maybe about 20 minutes back into running, and I was by myself, and one of these things was like in the road, and I turned over and looked at it because I'm like, is this even real? And then he looked at me like, looking at me like, am I even real? And then I was like, all right. So I kind of just looked at him and I was like, hey, buddy. And he looked up, turned and ran towards the other side of the road, and then came back and then turned and ran towards me and then ran off into the bushes. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah, I've heard stories about how they thought they're hallucinating, so they talked to the freaking deer, and then the deer just stared at them, and they went back
Yeah,
to running and realized, oh shit, no, that deer was actually there. Why was I talking to the deer?
Yeah, nah, these guys just chill. They're big, chill vibes. I mean, you technically can't touch them, you know what I mean? But they want you to, is what it seems like.
Oh, that's funny. But I guess going into the early miles, you start at Key Largo, and then you head out to Plantation, and around mile 20, you hit God, I do not know how to say the name of the island.
Isla Mirada,
Yeah, you hit Almirada,
like
and
Robbie's in that whole area.
yeah, that whole area. I mean, that's the first 20-ish miles. How did those miles go down?
So, I mean, Isla Mirada is where me and my wife actually did a majority of our honeymoon. So we stayed at one of the places right on the beach, and it was pretty cool because we got to run right by it. So that was pretty cool. And we always like hanging out at Robbie's. So it was kind of a nice little boost being like, I've driven this drive like up, a bunch of times. So it was, I knew where a lot of these landmarks were. So as I was running to them, I'm like, oh man, I'm here. That's cool. Like I kind of knew where I was at, like based upon like which landmarks I was hitting. But I mean, getting the first like 20 miles out of the way was pretty nice. I mean, once you start getting towards Isla Morada is where you really start picking up on those bridges and you start getting a little bit of that sun exposure. There's a couple of bridges that I know the 7 Mile Bridge is, like the main, piece of this race and like the hype piece of the Keys. But there's a couple of other bridges that I don't think are officially named, but might be the 3 Mile Bridge or like a 2 Mile Bridge because some of them are super duper long. And the amount of people fishing off of some of these bridges is insane. So it's like, you're running and I love that they're all out there using the fishing pier and everything. But it's just like, if you look at some of the photos from some of the bridge sections of the Keys, it's just like, you're almost running like hurdles, like jumping over people's fishing poles and stuff like that. And all of these people are looking at you like you're crazy.
Well, I think to that point, I mean, a lot of people, they hear about the 7 Mile Bridge, but they really sleep on the fact that, like, coming into 40 miles, you got Veterans Key, Craig's Key, Fiesta Key, Long Key, Conch Key, coming into mile 40, which I think technically is like Grassy Key, or I don't know, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's that stretch before you even hit the 7 Mile Bridge, which is around 50-ish. But I mean, coming into 40 miles, I mean, how did that go down?
So, I mean, I still felt pretty dang good coming into 40 miles. I mean, the bridges I thought were honestly pretty awesome because, I had Costas on for the whole race. And I don't know if you've ever worn Costas on the water, but you can just like cut through the water and you can see. And I mean, I was seeing a bunch of fish the whole time, a couple sea turtles. There was so much wildlife for it being a relatively urban ultra. I was pretty impressed with how much wildlife I ended up seeing. But I mean, I was just kind of enamored with the bridges, if I was being honest with you. So much so that I don't even know that I really noticed that I was running over a bridge with elevation change or anything, which was kind of cool. But I was just so like the Keys water is just incredible to me, like how clear and teal looking it is. So when you get up there, and honestly, that was one of the places where you got a lot of the breeze. So for me, it was actually kind of nice being on the bridges because you got like a little bit of a air conditioning effect going on once you started actually going onto the bridge and cleared from some of the mangroves and everything. That was the hottest part of the race to me, was when you were off of a bridge and in a section of mangroves with sun just beating down on you. Then you're not really feeling any of that breeze.
That's what's wild too, because once you hit those, like, the little mangrove path sidewalk sections, dude, that heat just gets trapped inside of there. And it's like if you ever reached into the oven to pull out your food, that's
Uh-huh.
what it feels like.
Yes, like it smacks you in the face because especially you come off that, cross breeze or a little bit of the ocean breeze or whatever hitting you. And then you're like, all right, that's pretty nice. That's cool. And then you get 2 or 3 more miles in and you're like, oh, damn, where did that breeze go? Who turned the fan off?
Yeah, because it's interesting because it's not like you just kind of it's not that you just ease into it either. It's all of a sudden, it's like you just hit a wall of heat.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I started at 7 a.m. By 10 a.m., I was like, oh, damn, all right. Because I had been, kind of tracking the weather like the whole week up ahead of time, which is stupid because, no shame on weatherman or anything, but they don't have any clue what the hell's going on. So for like 3 or 4 days looking up to it, the weather was like, oh, it's going to be, in the 80s with rain and clouds and the wind's going to be 20 miles an hour and all this. Yeah, well, guess what? On rain day, there was no wind, there was no rain. I mean, there was maybe like an 8 to 10 mile an hour wind, but like I said, you really only felt that when you were going over the bridges. So it was one of those things where when it got hot, it wasn't just like, hey, I'm going to gradually start getting hot. It was just like flip the switch, like you said, turn the oven on. Here we go. And then, I mean, the other thing about being in the Keys is like you can look at the sunset time, but the real sunset time is like a lot after that because of, you're just on the water. So the sun was out, I mean, for probably 13 or 14 hours. Not as hot during, the back little hour or whatever, but it was roasting.
Yeah, and I think that's what people forget too. We've said it probably twice already now too. With it could be 80, 85 degrees. That's hot, but what people don't think about, where's that sun going down to? That sun is hitting concrete, which will then reflect upward. You're also surrounded by water, which is also
Yes.
reflecting the heat.
Yes. And so I had a couple of, sun masks or whatever to bring with me, but they ended up in the pre-packet like pickup thing gave us like one of those UPF like sun masks, and that's what I ended up wearing for the whole entire day. And I mean, my nose got a little sunburnt and stuff like that, but mainly just the back of my legs, which is, kind of on me. And then the top of my hands. My Garmin line right now is absolutely ridiculous.
Oh yeah, because I know I always forget to put sunscreen on my hands. I'll hit everything else, but
Uh-huh.
I forget about my hands and fingers.
And it's only mainly like half of my hand because, when you're in that running motion, you kind of have your arms, the back half of your palm is like facing down. So the bottom half of my hand is all right, but it's like the top around my thumbs and my index finger got absolutely roasted.
I totally forgot about that aspect of running in the sun.
Yeah, I did too. And then by the time I realized it, I was like, oh man, it's too late.
Which, I mean, eventually the sun does go down. And I mean, take me in the marathon. You're 50 plus miles in, y- and now you've got that 7 mile bridge ahead of you. What's it like out there?
So I feel like I was pretty fortunate. Well, first of all, after I ended up leaving, I think the last cruise station, the Marathon Turtle Hospital, super big shout out to them because they set up like their own aid station. I guess they had one of their employees that was running in the race, but they had like super duper cold Gatorade set up and they had water, which they were refilling water bottles. I picked up, my, hydration pack before going over the bridge because you can't have any crew access for that part of the bridge. And, they hooked it up with some extra waters and stuff like that. And so shout out to the Marathon Turtle Hospital. And, but by the time I got to the actual bridge, there was maybe a group of like 7 or 8 of us that all kind of started going over the bridge at the same time, and we were all generally going the same pace. Nobody was really talking to each other, but I feel like everybody was kind of glad to have somebody else there with them for that stretch of the race, and it worked out really well. You know what I mean? It's kind of one of those weird things where you can vibe without really saying anything because everybody's just kind of like in the shit at that point, you know?
You cut through the day now. All right, come on. We just got to hold it together for the night.
Yes.
But I mean, you hit the 7 mile bridge at the sunsetting time. I mean, how'd the 7 mile bridge go?
It was super awesome. I mean, by the time the sun was going down, I started hitting that peak, which I don't know if it's halfway, but I think it's about halfway where, it's got the rise and the span. And by the time I got to the top of the bridge, the sun was actually like cresting below the like the horizon. Man, talk about a sunset, Like I don't know how many people have stood on top of the hump of the 7 Mile bridge and got to see the sunset, but damn, you know? And then it got dark very quick. and then I realized, oh man, there's still like 3 miles of this bridge left. And I'm a huge Fred the Tree guy. I don't know if you know what Fred the Tree is, but
No.
on the side of the old 7 Mile bridge, there's a big old pine tree that's just been like growing through the cracks, and it shouldn't be there by any means, but it's been growing there, and it's kind of like a national. I want to say it's like a historical marker. Could be wrong on that, but it is to me. And I wanted to see it, and I got to see Fred through the darkness, so that was cool. But I was super thankful to get off of that bridge because as soon as you get off the bridge, there's a crew stop, and got to see my wife, a little bit of rejuvenation there. And then I also got to take the pack off, which, I mean, I've done a lot of these races with a pack on, but any opportunity to be able to run without a pack on, especially 50 miles, and then putting a pack on, you're like, oh man, how do I do this? It's like putting a weight vest on in the middle of a race.
And that's what's wild, because I know, like, leading up after that, eventually you do make it to mile 86, where that's where your watch died. I
Yes.
mean, take me into that. How did those miles to that watch dying, how'd that go down?
So, I mean, after the bridge, I was definitely starting to slow down, a lot more run walking at that point. And, but I was still feeling good. I mean, one of the biggest things is I usually start cramping up right about that mileage. And I've, just been kind of figuring out how to get calories in and eat what you need to eat. Like at the end of this race, I added it all up and I ended up burning close to like 13,000 calories. So it's kind of one of those things that when you actually look at the numbers, you're like, dude, I could eat everything and it's not going to be enough. So I kind of went into that with this mentality, and it got to a point where I just was like eating so much that I just felt so full that in those kind of miles leading up to the 85 mile mark, I kind of stopped eating a little bit. And then when I looked down and saw my watch died, I was like, man, this is how I feel inside right now. You know what I mean? And I ended up I was only maybe about a half mile from the next stop. And the nice thing about this race is, I mean, it's generally a straight shot, so you don't really need the watch for, navigation or anything like that. So just kind of limped it in, set a couple cuss words, and then plugged my watch in. And like I said, I didn't even think about it. But at one point, there was a post that was cut off, maybe 6 inches up, and it was leading up to one of these crossing bridges, and I kicked it super hard and immediately woke myself up, and I was like, all right, cool. Apparently on a Garmin Enduro 3, when you put the battery or when you put the flashlight on full blast, it just smashes the battery life on it. So as soon as my watch died, I was like, all right, let me look this up real quick. And I looked it up, and it was like, yeah, dumbass, it's going to drain the battery real fast because it's a, bright flashlight. And okay. So I pulled in there, plugged it in. I got about 9% out of it. And then it held that 9% for the rest of the race. But at that point, it was more of just let me get this done. I don't even need to know what pace I'm going. I just need, forward motion.
You really are going one direction. And at this point, you do have less than 20 miles to go. I guess, take me into Key West. How did it go until you finally hit that last key?
Well, so that's the deal. I hit Big Pine Key, and I was like, oh, cool, I'm super close. And then I looked it up, and I'm like, oh, man, I still got 20 miles to go and 5 of these keys to cross, because there's so many of those keys through that section that are just tiny little, maybe 1 mile stretch of an actual piece of land. So that part was equally nice because I knew I was within 20 miles of finishing, but I was also like, oh man, there's so many more bridges I'm going to have to cross in between now and there. And then the stretch leading up to the air base, I was really hoping Tom Cruise and, was going to start flying over with Top Gun or whatever. And that was really going to amp me up. And that didn't happen. But, so we ended up rounding around that corner. And I want to say that's leading up towards the bridge that's coming into Key West. And I mean, it was so nice to see that final bridge. And once I got across that bridge, I then remembered that last whole mile and a half, 2 miles is along the beach, Smathers Beach in Key West. And I was like, oh man, that's going to be so hot. And I was right. It was so hot.
But I don't know, there's something exciting about seeing the Key West sign.
There is, definitely. I mean, especially after, you're grinding it out. And I mean, there was people out, but a majority of the people that I saw for the prior, 27 hours were just my wife and then other people's crew and then other people that were racing. Couple people on bikes here and there, but once you got into that section of Key West, it was a little bit of civilization again. People started looking at you like you're crazy. It was cool because there was a lot of people that, had already finished or were hanging out or crewing still. So people are driving by and honking at you and, yelling out the window and stuff. And I mean, it was definitely a motivation. At that point, though, my foot, like the pad of my foot had really started to blow up. And that last like 2 miles, as soon as I made the left going towards Higgs Beach, like I had a massive blood blister that I felt fill. And I was like, oh man. And so, ended up walking it in from there. But we got it done. So
I mean, outside of the blister, though, I mean, take me through the finish line. I mean, how did it feel to get that finish?
I mean, it was super awesome. It was something that I had thought about pretty much every day for like the last 6 months. I mean, like every long training day, I do a lot of training by myself. Like 99% of my runs are, on my own and everything. And it's super awesome that I get to share something like this with my wife too, who also loves the keys. And I mean, we get to have these experiences together where, a lot of people just don't. It's one of those things where I feel like she doesn't even probably realize it, but it definitely makes us super tight. And I am forever, grateful for it. It's one of those things where I move my legs, but it is kind of a team aspect as far as that, and crossing through the finish line was super nice. It was also incredibly hot.
I think that's the big thing too, because it is such a team effort, and it's kind of like like what do ultras really teach you about yourself?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that you can learn through ultra is that there really are no limits. Like I know a lot of these people, set these 100-mile weeks and all this other stuff, and it might sound unattainable. And you look at some of these people that do Cocodona. I have a feeling that if anybody has done something before, it can be accomplished, especially if you put your mind to it and you set your goals. And I mean, the thing with ultra is there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. And it's a mental, really just like gymnastics game of being like, man, I hurt so bad and I could just stop right now and this could all be over. But the amount of growth that you get, I feel like as a person by seeing your way through that and actually finishing what you started, I think that's important in life in general, to finish the things that you start. If you say you're going to do something, do it. That's a good life principle to have in general. And I mean, I also look at a lot of these aspects of these races now of being like, man, if I quit, then my wife just drove all these miles and everything for absolutely nothing, and I don't even get like a cool buckle out of this or anything. So
Well, that is a good point. You have to finish to make the wife happy.
always.
But I think the gymnastics of it, that is a really good point that you brought up, because you have the mental side of the distance, you have the physical side, but you also have the mental fatigue of it too.
So I grew up playing a lot of sports when I was a kid. There's probably not a sport that I didn't try at least for a season. But I did track in high school. I was more of a field guy. I did high jump, so I wasn't into like, distance running or anything like that. And I'll be honest with you, through the majority of my life, I've hated running long distances. And it's kind of one of those things that I looked at of being like, man, I don't like this. Let me conquer this. You know what I mean? And it's kind of one of those things of like, do the things in life that are hard because you want to grow from that. And if you do it and you don't like it, then cool, you can, move on and do something else. But at least you have the experience of doing whatever it is that you set out to do. I've always tried to live my life with a little bit of, hey, let me try everything. You don't have to be the best at one specific thing, but if you try a million different things and you know a little bit about a lot, I mean, that helps you out in so many different aspects of life. 100 miles, 28 hours of running, I mean, that makes a lot of simple life tasks not as big as they seem. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's a really that's a really good point to it. And I guess we can kind of start to wrap it up with, it's the classic question of, the good, bad, and the ugly. So I guess, what was the good, the bad, and the ugly for the Keys 100?
All right. The good was I knocked almost 5 hours, knocked 4 hours and 45 minutes off my previous 100 time, which I'm super happy with. The bad was the back of my calves, which got absolutely blasted. And then I guess the ugly would probably be the 7-hour drive home the next day after the race.
Oh, just being stiff and walking.
Yeah, not fun. No traffic, but still 7 hours, Blows my mind every time I drive to the Keys. I'm like, man, I live in Central Florida and it's still 400 miles in 7 hours or whatever.
Obviously, you've conquered this and then you've conquered Tampa Bay before. What's next?
I mean, you know what? Whatever. I'll put it on record. I'm going for sub 24 at Tampa. So, I mean, I'm going for a finish in general. I'm only competitive really with myself and things when it comes to this nature. I love watching everybody in our Florida ultra running community just absolutely crush it and push themselves. It is so motivating. When I did the aid station at your Skunk Ape 100 in April, I mean, just watching everybody that came through that aid station out there, holy shit. So motivating. I mean, it just makes me want to be the best person that I can be and, get out there and just log miles and try to keep setting milestones and hitting them.
Heck yeah. Awesome.
Hell yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Well, it was super fun chatting with you, dude.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, buddy.
Heck yeah.
All right, buddy. I'll see you out there in July.
Yep. See ya.
See you now.
Welcome to the Florida Trail Runners Podcast. Out in the woods, out in the swamps, down by the Wheeler Coochie. It started with a podcast, that's the thing. The Florida Trail Runners. I see the skunk ape, chasing me down, chasing me down. I'm doing the long haul, running all over town, A station to A station, I see the skunk ape, chasing me down. I'm doing the long haul, running all over town, Starting in the north, Tallahassee. Starting Central Florida, Tampa, Ocala, Orlando, Day City. Green Swamp, headed down south. Headed to the Keys, lake to ocean. Miami, out to the East Coast. Daytona, Jacksonville, Pioneer Trail. On a single trail, running 1 to 100 miles. A station to A station, all around. The Florida Trail Runner. Feet hit dirt where the palm trees sway. Mossy oaks, palmetto, pines and cypress knees. All grass bending, go find your way. Swarm mist rising, every step I take I feel it flow. Beach sunrises.